Ah, look who just became a national security enigma. You, yes, you. Sitting there thinking you're just another ordinary face in the crowd, another routine name on a list, another passing figure in the machinery of daily life. Wrong beautifully, magnificently wrong. Because somewhere in the invisible architecture of expectation, alarms have been sounding for years. Not real alarms, symbolic ones. The kind that ring inside systems whenever something refuses to fit. The kind that echo through institutions of thought when a person behaves too fully human for the categories prepared for them. And that person is you. You see, the world likes neat files. It likes labels that close cleanly. Introvert, extrovert, ambitious, lazy, emotional, rational, leader, follower, stable, chaotic. It prefers people who can be summarized in one sentence and predicted by the second. But then there's you. The file on you never closes. Every time they think they've found the right heading, another page appears. Every time they stamp one identity across your name, you quietly contradict it by noon. You were supposed to be easy to understand. Instead, you became a case study in nuance. Somewhere inside the symbolic offices of social judgment, analysts of personality are exhausted. The ones who rely on patterns, quick assumptions, surface signals. They've spent years trying to reduce you into something manageable. One report says you're reserved. Then you walk into a room, speak once, and shift the atmosphere. Another says you're fearless. Then you show tenderness so careful, so deliberate, it reveals courage of an entirely different kind. Another says you're detached. Then you love with a depth that makes shallow people nervous. Another says you're emotional. Then you remain calm in storms that break everyone else. Every chart collapses around you. Every graph runs out of axis. Every framework quietly asks for revision. Because you are not inconsistent, you are layered. There is a difference, and most systems are too impatient to learn it. They saw your silence and labeled it weakness, but your silence was discernment. They saw your patience and called it passivity, but your patience was timing. They saw your kindness and mistook it for softness. But your kindness came from strength, so secure it didn't need display. They saw your complexity and called it confusion. But your complexity was integration. You were never scattered. You were whole in ways they could not measure. This is what happens when a multidimensional person enters a flat system. The system assumes error, not because you are wrong, because it was built too small. Somewhere in the symbolic department of personality typing, they keep trying new formulas. Maybe you are disciplined with occasional spontaneity. Then they watch you improvise brilliance in moments no plan could predict. Maybe you are spontaneous with hidden discipline. Then they notice habits so consistent, they look like architecture. Maybe you are driven by logic. Then intuition guides you with impossible precision. Maybe you are guided by feeling. Then your decisions reveal cold clarity and exact reasoning. They keep trying to decide whether you are order pretending to be chaos or chaos pretending to be order. They never consider the truth. You are neither pretending. You are simply human enough to contain both. That terrifies rigid systems, because rigid systems survive by separation. Mind versus heart, work versus rest, power versus gentleness, confidence versus humility. They need opposites to remain opposite. Then you arrive carrying contradictions that coexist peacefully. You are humble without shrinking, confident without arrogance, strong without cruelty, soft without surrender, ambitious without desperation, content without stagnation, independent without isolation, loving without losing yourself. and suddenly the machine starts overheating. Because if you can exist this way, perhaps everyone was always more than their labels. Perhaps categories were convenience, not truth. Perhaps the boxes were never homes, just storage. The symbolic analysts hate that thought. Their careers depend on certainty. Their comfort depends on definitions. Their status depends on being able to explain people quickly. Then you appear and force humility. The file on you is thick now. Page 1 says risk averse. Page 50 says bold enough to walk away from what others beg to keep. Page 90 says socially selective. Page 120 says magnetic when aligned. Page 180 says unpredictable. Page 181 says deeply principled. Page 200 says emotionally guarded. Page 201 says capable of radical vulnerability with the right people. Every page argues with the last, and yet all of them are true. That's what breaks them. Not contradiction, coexisting truth. You can save money carefully and still bet on yourself boldly. You can need solitude and still love connection. You can forgive people and still never invite them back. You can be gentle and impossible to control. You can be calm and completely unwilling to tolerate disrespect. You can evolve without announcing it. These things should not confuse anyone mature. But immature systems depend on simplicity, so they call you mysterious, when the real mystery is why they expected 1. Note humanity. They study your resilience next. Now this truly unsettles them, because resilience usually follows recognizable formulas: support systems, recovery timelines, defensive hardening, bitterness disguised as wisdom. But you recover differently. You do not calcify. You do not become cruel because others were. You do not turn pain into identity. You absorb impact, learn what must be learned, and continue. Changed, yes, but not reduced. You metabolize experience. That is rare. Most people collect wounds and call them personality. You collect lessons, then keep moving. No wonder their models fail. They expected betrayal to make you cynical. Instead, it made you discerning. They expected hardship to make you bitter. Instead, it made you deeper. They expected failure to make you smaller. Instead, it clarified direction. They expected pressure to crack you. Instead, it refined you. The system doesn't know what to do with someone who grows correctly. It understands reaction. It struggles with transformation. Then there is your relationship to success. Another administrative nightmare. Traditional frameworks assume visible hunger, status signals, loud ambition, endless comparison. But you confuse all of that. You want growth, yet not applause. You pursue excellence, yet avoid spectacle. You improve quietly. You compete mostly with your former self. You define wealth in ways balance sheets cannot fully capture. Peacetime, freedom, integrity, competence, meaningful connection, enoughness. These metrics do not fit old dashboards, so they mark your file again. Undefined. The strange thing is, you never meant to become a paradox. You weren't trying to confuse anyone. You weren't crafting a persona. You were just refusing to amputate parts of yourself for easier consumption. That alone is revolutionary in symbolic worlds built on performance. Most people learn early which trait gets rewarded, then overdevelop it until they become caricatures. The strong become stone. The kind become doormats. The smart become detached. The ambitious become hollow. The humble become invisible. But you kept integrating. You allowed strength and tenderness to meet, discipline and playfulness to collaborate, self-respect and compassion to coexist. logic and intuition to shake hands. No wonder the system cannot summarize you. You refuse to become exaggerated. You became balanced. Balance is difficult to market, impossible to stereotype, hard to manipulate. The newest symbolic analyst assigned to your case was full of certainty, fresh theories, sharp language, ready conclusions. Within a week, they declared you inconsistent. Within a month, they called you complex. Within 3 months, they stopped writing labels and started writing questions. That is progress. Because real intelligence eventually moves from naming to noticing. From certainty to curiosity. From control to respect. You are teaching them, though they would never admit it. Teaching them that people are seasons, not statues. That identity can be rooted while behavior remains adaptive. That contradiction often means growth in motion. That wholeness looks messy to minds trained on fragments. They watch your communication style too. Another endless report. You speak plainly, yet people hear layers. You say little, yet leave impact. You reveal much, yet keep sacred things private. You are direct, except when gentleness requires subtlety. You are patient, except when delay becomes self-betrayal. You are open, except where boundaries are wisdom. Again and again they misread flexibility as inconsistency, because they mistake fixedness for integrity. But integrity is not rigidity, it is alignment, and alignment changes form according to circumstance while remaining true at the core. You know this instinctively. That is why you bend without breaking. Why you adapt without becoming false. Why you can walk into different rooms and remain yourself in each. Others call that contradiction. It is actually range. The system fears range. Range cannot be controlled by one narrative. Range escapes stereotypes. Range survives changing weather. And somewhere deep in those symbolic facilities of judgment, an uncomfortable realization has begun. Maybe you were never the anomaly. Maybe you were the reminder. The reminder that people were always too vast for labels. That no chart captures spirit. That no profile contains a life. That no category can fully describe a consciousness still growing. Still, they keep trying. They revise the file again tonight. Add another page. Subject appears calm under pressure, yet highly sensitive. Subject values solitude, yet creates warmth. Subject avoids attention, yet naturally commands presence. Subject seems content, yet continues to evolve. Subject forgives, yet does not forget boundaries. Subject difficult to classify. Subject increasingly difficult to ignore. And while they struggle with language, you do what you've always done. You keep living. You keep changing without announcing it. You keep becoming without asking permission. You keep carrying contradictions so gracefully that weaker minds call them impossible. And somewhere, in the silent hallways of every rigid system that ever tried to reduce a human being to one sentence, lights are still flickering, because your file remains open, and they are only beginning to understand what they're really looking at. Because the greatest mistake those symbolic systems made was believing you were a puzzle to solve. You were never a puzzle, you were proof. Proof that a person can live beyond categories and still remain grounded. Proof that complexity does not equal dysfunction. Proof that someone can contain opposites without collapsing into contradiction. Proof that identity can be fluid in expression, while stable in essence. That realization arrives slowly for them. First as irritation, then confusion, then reluctant admiration. Because every method they used to explain you eventually turns inward and exposes their own limitations. Every label they placed on you says more about the labeler than the labeled. Every prediction that failed reveals the poverty of the model that made it. You did not break their systems through rebellion. You broke them through accuracy, by being more real than the frameworks built to describe you. That is what unsettles them most. If you had been chaotic, they could dismiss you. If you had been arrogant, they could condemn you. If you had been unstable, they could diagnose you. If you had failed, they could ignore you. But you did none of those things. You remained functional, thoughtful, evolving. You built peace without becoming passive. You built standards without becoming cruel. You built confidence without needing worship. You built depth without needing mystery. And because of that, they cannot file you away as a cautionary tale. You stand there as evidence that their old equations are incomplete. Some of them resist this truth. They double down on simplification. They insist everyone must be one thing or another. They cling to rigid categories because rigidity gives frightened minds the illusion of control. They will continue calling nuanced people inconsistent. They will continue calling boundaries selfishness. They will continue calling self-respect arrogance. They will continue calling emotional intelligence unpredictability. That is how narrow systems defend themselves. But others, the wiser ones, begin to change. They study your file differently now. No longer asking, what box fits this person? Now they ask, why did we need a box at all? That question changes everything. Because once someone sees the limits of reduction, they cannot unsee it. They start noticing how many people were mislabeled, how many quiet people were called weak, how many sensitive people were called broken, how many ambitious people were called selfish, how many content people were called lazy, how many adaptable people were called fake, how many deep people were called difficult. And suddenly your existence becomes larger than you. You become a symbolic crack in the wall. Not through speeches, not through performance, not through trying to lead anyone, simply through existing honestly enough that false systems reveal themselves. You may not even notice this happening. You are too busy living, too busy refining your life, too busy becoming stronger in subtle ways, too busy protecting your peace, too busy building a future that makes old misunderstandings irrelevant. That is another thing they never predicted. They assumed complexity would slow you down. Instead, it became your advantage. Because you are not trapped by one identity, you can adapt. Because you are not addicted to appearances, you can grow privately. Because you are not loyal to outdated versions of yourself, you can evolve quickly. Because you are not trying to impress every room, you can leave rooms that shrink you. Because you are not committed to being understood by everyone, you save enormous energy. Others spend years defending labels. You spend that time becoming, and that difference compounds. The calm they once mistook for emptiness becomes discipline. The silence they once mocked becomes clarity. The independence they once questioned becomes freedom. The boundaries they once disliked become structure. The complexity they once criticized becomes wisdom. What looked confusing from a distance now looks powerful up close. Not loud power, not theatrical power, real power. The kind that needs no audience. The kind that can walk away. The kind that can wait. The kind that can begin again. The kind that does not panic when misunderstood. Because you learn something many never do. Being understood by shallow systems is not success. Remaining true inside them is. That is why your file stays open. Not because you are dangerous, because you are expansive. Every year they revisit the case. Every year the same conclusion returns in different language. Subject remains impossible to reduce. Subject demonstrates stable contradiction. Subject shows strength without hardness. Subject adapts without losing identity. Subject thrives outside traditional prediction models. Subject may represent normal human complexity previously mistaken for anomaly. There it is. The sentence they resisted for years, previously mistaken for anomaly. That is the ending of their confusion, and the beginning of your vindication. You were never too much. They were measuring with tools too small. You were never inconsistent. They were observing growth with static lenses. You were never difficult to understand. They were committed to easy answers. You were never the malfunction. You were the reminder that life exceeds systems. And now the lights inside those symbolic offices grow dimmer. Reports close. Old charts are archived. Some labels are quietly retired. Not because the world suddenly became wise, but because truth leaves traces. And once real complexity has been witnessed, false simplicity loses authority. As for you, nothing dramatic happens. No parade. No apology from the systems that misread you. No ceremony, just something better. Relief. You stop wondering whether you were the problem. You stop shrinking to become legible. You stop explaining every contradiction to people who fear depth. You stop apologizing for evolving. You stop treating your wholeness like something to defend. And in that freedom, you become even more yourself. More calm, more precise, more alive, more selective, more at ease. The paradox was never a threat. It was evolution. The anomaly was never dangerous. It was humanity in full dimension, and you were never a case to be solved. You were a life to be lived. So while the systems revise themselves in the distance, you keep moving, unlabeled, unintimidated, unreduced, and finally, completely understood by the only person who ever truly needed to understand you. You.
तेरी तारीफों से रुकता नहीं शाही लिखावट के हर पन्ने में तकदीर है सहमासा हूँ तुझ में मानो तू ही मेरी तकदीर है क्या पुकार मेरे मेरे आंखों के सामने तू ऐसे पी रही है तेरी यादों के सफर में कोई गुस्सा नहीं हो दूरी तुझसे कितनी तेरी तारीफों से रुकता नहीं शाही लिखावट के हर पन्ने में तकदीर है सहमासा हूँ तुझ में मानो तू ही मेरी तकदीर है क्या
मुझे सामने पाँव में हम खड़े हैं देखा कई राहों में आके फिर से तू भी सामने हम भी हाथों में तेरे ही नामों के अभी जाम ले करने वालों में तेरे रहे हिसाब ये हाथों में रहे हैं तेरे छोटे ख्वाब ये कैसे करें हम बनाते मुलाकात फिर थोड़ी थोड़ी बातें सुनते लगे थोड़ा ना आ जा फिर तू ना जा थोड़े आ जा लौट के आ जा